Today on our 2017 Newmar Canyon Star on our Ford F-53 chassis, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Roadmaster rear anti-sway bar, part number RM-1139-149.
I've had it for 5 months now, and we've already put 10,000 miles on it. And when we drove from Kansas City to Minot, North Dakota and back, we got a lot of crosswinds and stuff. And although this thing handles pretty good, when you get in the crosswinds or you get a lot of tractor trailers flying by you, it takes off and will try to push you off to the side and then suck you back onto the road. And I didn't like that. So we started looking for some enhancements to enhance the handling and stability of it, and found etrailer online, and I'd looked at them before for some other stuff years ago and used them. So I thought, well, let me check, see if they've got anything, and sure enough they did, and we ordered it. Didn't quite get everything we were trying to get. There's still some parts that need to come in, but we've got the stabilizers on it already now, and just coming out of the parking lot I can tell it's a whole lot better. This thing used to take and it'd feel like you're falling over when you're going around a sharp corner or through the parking lots that are uneven and you hit a little bit of a dip. And yeah, that feels a whole lot more stable going around the corner.
Any other takeaway feelings you have about it?
Great job. I love it. Just the two stabilizer bars made a huge difference.
This is what a rear anti-sway bar looks like when it's installed. Keep in mind, this is not replacing our factory sway bar, it's adding to it. So let's say you're driving down the highway and, for instance, you get a crosswind on the driver's side. Because your RV is top heavy, it wants to lean or sway. But what this is going to do is, because it's attached to the frame, as the RV leans, it's putting downward pressure on your end link, putting downward pressure on your sway bar, and that downward pressure is being transferred over to the other side. So as it's getting that downward pressure, the other side of the RV, as it wants to pull up, the downward pressure is holding it down. So it's reducing that sway. It's going to reduce driver fatigue because the sway bar is doing the work for you instead of the driver having to muscle the steering wheel. The sway bar is going to have a black powder coat finish, which is going to help reduce any rust or corrosion. It's going to be made out of a chrome moly steel, which is going to add strength and durability. Now your bushings are going to be made out of a polyurethane. They're going to be a lot more durable than your typical rubber ones, which tend to break down and stretch out. When the rubber ones break down and stretch out, you get movement in the bar. The polyurethane bushings are going to hold their shape, so you're not going to have to worry about any movement in the bar over time. So to start our installation, we're going to start in the back of the vehicle here. And if you look in the wheel well, and you can start on either side, driver's side or passenger, they're both going to be the same. If you look in the wheel well behind the tires, you're going to see 4 bolt heads. Now what that's holding on is there's a beam that runs across on the inside of the frame from one side of the vehicle to the other. Those 4 bolts are holding that in place. What we want to do is we want to take out the 2 bottom ones. And we're going to do that on both sides. We'll be using a 13/16 socket. What you're going to have to do now, when this vehicle is sitting down, those 2 bottom bolts are going to sit behind the spring and you're not going to have much room. So what you want to do is you want to raise up the vehicle while the tires are hanging, so it lowers that spring. Now these are pretty difficult to get off, so you might have to actually, before you raise it or anything, get underneath of it with an actual wrench, put the wrench on there with a breaker bar and break them loose first. Now we're going to install our end link bracket. The 2 bolts that we removed are going to be installed in the same place, but they're going to go through this bracket first. So it'll sit up just like that. You want to make sure that it's on the outside of the frame. You go ahead and slide your bolt into place. Then on the inside, you're going to have bolt plates. Once you get these started, you're not going to have to hold them with a wrench or anything. They will actually hold themselves on the cross beam when you go to tighten them down. So we'll go ahead and get those started by hand. Once you get them hand tightened down, you can go back out and tighten them up the rest of the way. Once you get those tight, then we'll repeat the same process on the other side of the vehicle. Now we'll come underneath the vehicle, and on your rear axle, on each side of your axle, you're going to have large U-bolts. What we want to do is we want to remove the nuts off the bottom. Now, before you do that, you want to make sure that your axle is supported. If you have it up in the air, you want to make sure that you have stands or something underneath your axle so it doesn't hang. Because once you loosen this, there's going to be nothing holding it up. We'll be using an 1 5/16" socket, and I'm using a breaker bar to get them loose. And we're going to do the same thing with the remaining 3. Then we're going to repeat the process on the other side of the vehicle. You want to make sure when you loosen these, this bracket that's here on the bottom is going to be fairly heavy. So make sure when you loosen them that you don't drop that on yourself. If you find them a little difficult to get off, if you use some lubricant and spray each one, let it soak down inside for a little bit, you should be able to break them loose pretty easy. So next you're going to have 2 brackets like this in your kit. You want these 4 small holes to face the inside of the vehicle or center of the vehicle, and you want this angle right here to be pointing toward the center of the vehicle. So it's going to go on like this, and we're on the passenger side. Be careful with this bracket that's up here. It's kind of wedged in there right now, so I think we're good. We'll get this set in place and get our first, get one of our bolts started, or nuts started. You just want to make sure when you're tightening this down, you tighten it down evenly so your plate's not wedged sideways and tearing up the threads. Once you have your bolts tight, you go ahead and torque them down to the specifications and the instructions. Turn one a couple times and then turn another one so that they tighten down evenly. Once you get these torqued down, you're going to repeat that same process on the other side of the vehicle. Next, we're going to put our end links in place. Now your kit's going to come with some lubricant or some grease. You want to put a little bit around the edges on both sides on both end links before you put it in place. It's just, what that's going to do is it's going to help keep this, when it's up against the bracket, the frame bracket, it's going to help keep this from squeaking. Now we'll take our end link, we'll slide up into place. You're going to get 4 large bolts in your kit. You're going to go from the outside in. So the head of the bolt's going to be out toward the tire. Then you'll take your large lock nut, bolt it on the end, and then we'll go ahead and tighten those down. And you want to make sure you don't torque these. You just want them tight enough to where it's going to hold this in place. You still want this to be able to move just a little bit. We use a 15/16 wrench and socket. And we're going to do the same thing to the other side. Just like we did with our end links, we're going to put some more lubricant on the end of our sway bar. Next, we'll put our sway bar in place. You want to make sure when you're putting it in, you're putting it in the right way. You see the angle of the bar? It's going to sit right up close to your axle here. If you have it the other way, you won't be able to get it in. You'll take one of your long bolts again. Go ahead and slide it through. Our end link on each side. Once you get those in, go ahead and put on our lock nuts. We're just going to hand tighten these right now. You're going to get 4 bolts, smaller bolts in your kit, and each one's going to have 2 washers and a lock nut on it. We're going to remove the lock nuts and 2 of the washers. You look at the bottom of the bracket, we're going to be using this hole and this hole. And if you look at them, they're offset to the more toward the center of the vehicle. Go ahead and drop these in place. Then we're going to take our split poly bushing And you want to lubricate the inside of this. Now we're going to take our split poly bushing, we're going to put it over our sway bar, and you want to kind of line it up with the arm here. Then we'll take our bushing bracket here, put it over the top, like that. Now we can swing our sway bar up into place. I'm going to go ahead and just put a nut on just to hold it, then I can finish putting the rest of my hardware in. Now that we have our other side in place, we'll remove the nut here. We'll go ahead and put our washer on, then reinstall the nut. Next, we'll take an 18mm socket, 18mm wrench, and we're going to tighten these up. You don't want to go real tight with them. You want to make sure you pay attention to the torque specs on these bolts here. We're going to be using an 18mm socket on the nut and a 16mm socket on the bolt. Do the same thing on the other side. Once you got them tight, you can torque them to the specifications in the instructions. And we'll repeat that on the other side also. Next, we're going to take our 15/16 socket and wrench, and we're going to tighten down the bolts on our end links. Again, you don't want to tighten these down so tight that it's squishing those bushings. And we're going to repeat the same thing on the other side. That'll do it for the look at and installation on the Roadmaster rear anti-sway bar, part number RM-1139-149 on our 2017 Newmar Canyon Star on our Ford F-53 chassis.